Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll take you to another part of the world now, I'm afraid. A bit warmer, but no less complex than here. So the subject of my talk this afternoon is our Society of Antiquaries funded project in the Aeolian Islands, and in particular the island of Vulcano, which is in the north coast of Sicily. This project is part of a larger project which is funded by the Wellcome Trust, whose remit is to research the nature and efficacy of Greco-Roman antimicrobial minerals. These are the rocks, the minerals, the muds, the minerals-rich waters, which appear in the medicinal texts of the Greco-Roman antiquity and the post-medieval period. And the real question we are asking is, are they relevant to the world today? So, this is the umbrella. Let's home in now. So, Stevenson. James Stevenson was a Glasgow industrialist manufacturing sodium and potassium dichromates for the calico industry, the dyeing and the calico industries. So, Stevenson bought the island of Vulcano, the entire island, in 1870s for the express purpose of extracting sulfur from its volcano. It was shipped back to Glasgow and was turned into sulfuric acid, which is a necessary step in the making of the dichromates. Stevenson's legacy lives on in Vulcano today in the Casa dell'Inglese, a pseudo-Scottish baronial seen here. This is a 1980s photograph, right at the foothills of the Grand Crater da Fossa. Now, it is fittingly called the Casa dell'Inglese in honor, and not the Casa del Scozzese, which it should have been, but it is in honor of A.E. Narlian, who was his foreman and lived there with his family. Stevenson always stayed in his yacht. So why look for Stevenson in the first place, and why desperately at this moment in time? Stevenson was just one of a series of landowners, farmers, entrepreneurs, visitors and traders, eponymous and anonymous, who have exploited the island for its near unique natural resources. Looking for him, or rather his activities, meant that we had the possibility of retracing age-old practices associated with the extraction and processes of minerals, many of them fundamentally medicinal. But in order to get to Stevenson, let's first go back about 4 millennia earlier. So our work in the Aeolians and in the Bay of Naples has started some years ago when we sailed from the Aegean through the Straits of Messina and into the Tyrrhenian Sea, looking, among other things, for the Mycenaean presence in those islands. Now, Mycenaean pottery is very characteristic and sticks out from the local impasto ware. What were the Mycenaeans doing there? Well, we have suggested that they may have carried voyages of exploration, but perhaps more important, they were looking for alum and sulfur, two very important industrial minerals, used as antiseptic, antibacterials, hemostatics, but also in the tanning industry, in the mortarting, and the metallurgical ones. Alum first appears in the Linear B tablets around 1400 BC, and the first documented evidence for sulfur is in the Odyssey, whereupon Odysseus' old nanny helps him cleanse the halls where the slaughter of the suitors have taken place with sulfur. So, as I said, the sources for alum and sulfur are very important, and their sources are very few and far in between. They're associated, both minerals are associated with these solfataras. These are fields of hot soils, indicators of waning volcanic activity, with vents, as you see here, and holes, and with steam coming out. Now, the steam is rich in sulfur, which desublimes, goes from the gas to the solid, from the gas to the solid state, while at the same time, minerals, alunogen, and a whole lot of aluminium sulfates form as efflorescences out of the steam once the steam disappears. So it is essentially those two minerals that both Stevenson and numerous industrialists and traders before him came to these islands for. Let's look at the island now. Well, Greeks had no word for volcanoes. This is what the Oxford Dictionary tells us. And apparently the word volcano was coined by Italian and Portuguese sailors in the 15th century. Contrary to earthquakes, which were very common in the Mediterranean, of course, there was simply no opportunity to watch a volcano erupting, unless, of course, you were Pliny and you were sitting in looking at Vesuvius at the right time. So this island was called by the Greeks the Iera Iphestu, which means the island sacred to Hephaestus. And the island comprises of essentially 5 volcanic craters. One is the primordial volcano, which is essentially the first one here, as you see. Old stratovolcano, which dates to about 120,000 years ago. The second is the Piano Caldera, which is right there, and dates to about 100,000 years ago, with continuous eruption between 99,000 and 50,000 years ago. Lantia, a smaller one right here, and the one that we are mostly interested in, La Fossa, the Gran Cratere, the one you saw in the first slide, which formed around 6,000 years BP, and its most recent eruption is the one I'm going to be talking to you about in 1888 to 90. Finally is the tiny little Vulcanello, the island at the tip of Vulcano, which erupted in 183 BC. And in 1550s, there was this isthmus that was filled up between, now you can drive from the Vulcano to Vulcanello. So this is about the setting, and there is solfataras all around the rim. You can see here, and George is wearing his gas mask. Well, it's a very rudimentary one, but you can actually climb all the way to the rim and around it. And there is an 1825 report that says even invalids can do it. So it's not that difficult, but I wouldn't say that an invalid would do it. So, in any case, let's look a bit at the dramatis personae, so to speak. So, first we have a Nunziante, Vito di Nunziante, a Bourbon duke or general, who owned the island. These are all landowners of the said island. Bought the island at the turn of the 19th century, and which the island was deserted after the 1786 eruption, and started extracting sulfur and alum. He brought convicts from Lipari to do the job for him, but of course with Garibaldi's unification of Italy, he was out. And in steps our man, James Croesus. That's how his family called him, because he was very rich, Stevenson. Stevenson was part of a group of rich Glaswegians, adherents to the Free Church of Scotland, who firmly embraced Livingstone's work in Africa. He was the founder of a holiday home in Largs for, quote, overworked shop girls and others requiring rest. He was the inventor of a penny bank to encourage savings amongst the poor. You could pay a penny to one of the penny banks, and when the amount reached £1, it was transferred to the national savings banks. No bonus, just bank transfer there, nothing else. So he maintained a paternalistic approach towards Vulcanians, essentially telling them, this is now an island of sailors, telling them when to sail and if they could sail. And he was, as I said, a very keen yachtsman himself. He was an avid collector of antiquities. He financed his own excavation in Lipari and brought the finds to the Kelvingrove Museum, where they are now. At the time when he came to the inheritance of his father's cotton fortune, he was 47 years old, single, handsome, and very, very rich. He was a strange person, a bit of an eccentric, and his family biographer calls him a hypochondriac, afraid to exert himself, but in actual fact quite healthy. In 1903, he dies, and the estate passes on to this lady here, Isabella Conti, and her husband. She's was a veritable grande dame whose charitable work in the Aeolians earned her the love and respect of the islanders. And it is now with her son here, Signor Gustavo Conti, seen here with my colleague Andrea, that our own association with the island starts. Now, I have to say, because he's a big landlord, and because we're working right where, in his land, if it hadn't been for him, we literally wouldn't be able to do as much as we have done and as we hope to do. So there's another person here, an archduke, no less, another eccentric who traveled the Balearics and the Western Mediterranean, but he's the one who arrives in Vulcano after the great eruption, and we have actually records through his illustrations of how the island looked at the time. Now, the alum industry may have gone, the sulfur industry may have gone, but there is one industry, the wine industry, which is thriving, and this is because Stevenson brought in grapes, the Malmsey grape from the Malvasia. It's an appellation contrôlée, it's very much protected. And this is the place where it was stored and which you can visit today. And it's actually a pub right now, his pub. You can go in there and you're surrounded by Glasgow furniture of the 1890s, and you've just no idea what is hitting you. But it is an amazing place indeed. So, as I said, Stevenson bought the island in 1870. The major eruption happened on the 3rd of August, 1888, and there were continuous eruptions, as you can see here photographed, a year and a half practically of non-stop eruptions, which annihilated completely the works. You can see here, this is the Castello, or the Casa dell'Inglese. You can see it here, abandoned. And you can see the type of boulders that were ejected out of the volcano and went right through roofs. So it was a total destruction, and that was it, really. As far as Stevenson he went back once on his yacht, inspected, got back and out. Narlian and his 3 sons just barely escaped alive from these showers of stones. So this is the background, and now it's us arriving to the island, and as I said, it was touch and go whether we're going to find somebody to allow us to work in the area, but well, the gods were with us by the sound of it. And this is the area of the Faraglione where we focus our attention. This is the area where Stevenson had set the previous slide. Here these are the works, this is his house, and the Castello is right here. And the works now, as you see, are buried under, not physically buried, but transformed as shops, touristy shops. The extent of change on the island is horrendous, and it all happened literally in the last 30 years. So the remit of our survey was to match the existing documentary and photographic record with present-day urban development and what we see today. So that was one. The second was to record areas which are inaccessible today to the public, but which have, we know, research potential, and also, and most important, to elucidate Stevenson's day-to-day activities, and with a reference to those two minerals. Now, this is a lot easier said than done, because as you see, the evidence is buried, or, it's a settlement here, and it's very difficult to access it. One place why Vulcano is visited regularly now is because of the mud pool, which sits here. It belongs to Signor Conti, as everything else, and people spend, the bambini, the grannies, everyone spends time there for therapy. I have spent 3 hours on this mud pool, and I can tell you it's an amazing experience. You smell very heavily for the next 2 weeks of sulfur, but if you can manage, that's fine. So the two areas that we focus on is the Faraglione Grande and the Faraglione Piccolo. And as I said to you, the first job was to match what we see in the records with what we see today. And this photograph is taken from the volcano, and looks down at the Faraglione, which is right there and here. And this is the Porto di Levante and the Porto di Ponente, and Vulcanello is here. Now, the amazing thing about the Aeolians is that the islands collapse one into the other, and this was so difficult to understand from the Archduke's illustrations. But once you're there, they make perfect sense. They are so near to each other. So you think that you're on an island whose extension, you're looking at its extension, but actually you're looking to another island. Brian's amazing work in collating the evidence, the past and the present, as of 3rd of December here, was fundamental to focus our attention as to where exactly are we going to start looking. And this was really the remit of our 10 days work on the island in December, last December. So here is the Faraglione Grande, and you can see it here in the Archdukes. As you see, there's road cuts, the promenade has been built here. It's a vastly different. The workshops have been and will continue to be the most difficult area to access, because these are all tourist shops now. They are not destroyed, that far as we can tell with confidence, but they just have changed character, and it's private property and you can't really go in there. But here's the main street that you can see coming up there, and here it is. So we know we have oriented ourselves, and we know that what we're looking in the Archduke's illustrations is what we see today here, there. This is the view from the rim of the volcano, with the solfataras oozing away, and exactly the same look from Whewell's illustration in the 1700s. Now, both Stevenson's people and Nunciates and everybody else, they worked primarily in the volcano. And as the volcano was erupting, actually, because the continuation of operations, of activity, volcanic activity, never stopped. So people would drag out the sulfur from the crater and down paths to the port. I can't give you the exact dimension of the crater. It changes constantly, and depth, and so it's a very dynamic system. One fundamental question we had was Stevenson bringing from Vulcano the raw material, or was he processing it in the case of sulfur? So it's very difficult to tell with confidence at this moment in time, but certainly there are these calcarones. These are the furnaces where huge quantity, which are built on the side of the volcano, and far away from the community, of course, because the fumes are very bad, and they're open-aired, and because sulfur is self-igniting, you don't need charcoal, you don't need anything, it just melts away, and a low melting as well, it melts away and runs out of these furnaces. So we are not sure, but Signor Conti's accounts that he received from Stevenson seem to show that it was the raw material that was shipped to Glasgow rather than a processing stage. So this is very much under investigation. The most interesting bit is really the Cave di Allume, which is, as the cave of Allum. And again, Brian's masterly matching. This is completely, you can see, it overlooks the port right here. It is a very dangerous place to go in. There's no access, but again, Signor Conti obliged. So I hope to be able to show you the inside of this later, which is right here in a model. And this is really something that when it collapses, it will be the record for these activities within. Our interest is on the mud pool and on this north wall of the mud pool, which again is mapped here in a very precise way, so we can look at the pottery, we can zoom in and out. And the reason we are very much interested is because we found all these tuyere-like equipments, which are part, from Agricola we know, distilling sulfur. So all of a sudden, the area that apparently only Stevenson worked, well, the Romans may have been there. So this is our next stage of work, to cut a section, if Signor Conti allows, and when the bathers are not there, through this wall and do a proper evaluation of what we see inside. But of course, very important for us is the analysis of all the hundreds of minerals that we are collecting. As you see here, the two main components is alum and sulfur. This is, again, one of our simulations where this is the vent, the opening to the vent, and it's very important that we can home into the vents. Now, these are very important areas because, first of all, the minerals are coming out of here, but you may have heard extremophiles, microbial life, which lives at a pH of 2 and at temperatures of 200 degrees or thereabouts, live in proximity to those minerals. So we want to check whether which are those microorganisms, and to do that, and whether they contribute to the medicinality of the alum in these particular environments, or the sulfur, indeed. So this is the southern view of the volcano, and the one that is fascinating in its own right, and where we intend to do field walking, because we think that the evidence of occupation is quite early there, but no one, because the texts never say that anyone lived in Vulcano, archaeologically it is a completely virgin territory. So if I can, I will, sorry, I need to, sorry, Simon. I'll just, oops, here, it went by itself. So I'll show you what the model of that Brian produced of this completely inaccessible, as I said, place for the alum extraction. We know the last time it was alum came out of there was at least 100 years ago, but it is absolutely fascinating to us what kind of minerals were they extracting. Needless to say, Vulcano is the mineralogist's paradise. Hundreds, literally hundreds of new minerals are discovered. They have been discovered. So mineralogically is fundamental. But is it medicinal as well? And the fact that all this area has not been touched, no one is allowed to go in, is particularly attractive to us. And of course, the sampling is there, we have started, we will need to get back in there. But you see how important this having this modeling of the interior is, because we can literally pin our sampling procedures with respect to that. So Stevenson, is he there? Well, he's not there, definitely. Narlian is there, or was there. And, but that doesn't make him, obviously, less of an important person. The point is that we don't know how much we will actually be able to access, given that everything is now totally built over or occupied. But we think that if we are allowed to do the excavation in or the trial trench within the mud pool, then at least we will begin to unravel the layers, what is 19th century and Stevenson's, and what is earlier. And I think we're there for quite a few surprises. Thank you very much. I think it's finishing now.